All right.
So I need to do roll call and introductions. James. Wait.
You are off.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Can I get a roll call from the Civil Service Commissioners? Commissioner Moore?
Here.
Commissioner Stout? Here. Commissioner Everett? Commissioner Everett, James? Okay, we'll pass over that. And Commissioner Foster's here. So the three commissioners in attendance are Stoutmore and Foster. Can I get a motion for approval of minutes?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes for March 11th, 2026. Okay, let's move on to public comments. Do you have anyone online or in the room that would like to make some public comments? Ask some questions?
No one registered for public comments for today's meeting, Commissioner.
Okay, great. Having heard no one ask for time, we'll just move on to item number 4, deliberation of candidates. Gracie, if you could get us kicked off there.
No.
No.
Candidate 143898.
No.
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 Candidate 391653.
No.
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 Candidate 392427.
No.
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 Candidate 390354.
Yes.
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 Candidate 384218.
Yes.
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 Candidate 293265.
Yes.
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 Candidate 258590.
Yes.
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 Candidate 386531.
Yes.
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 Candidate 204237.
Yes.
Hold.
Yes.
Candidate 371229.
Yes.
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 Candidate 383677.
Yes.
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 Candidate 94751.
Yes.
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 Candidate 329584.
Yes.
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 Candidate 383476.
Yes.
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 Candidate 389600.
Yes.
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 Candidate 167172.
Yes.
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 Candidate 390262.
Yes.
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 Candidate 383936.
Yes.
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 Candidate 282179.
Yes.
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 Candidate 372322.
No.
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 Candidate 363680.
Yes.
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 Candidate 342419.
Yes.
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 Candidate 392293.
Yes.
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 Candidate 389659.
Yes.
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 Candidate 383904.
Yes.
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 Candidate 82739.
Yes.
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 Candidate 389537.
Yes.
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 Candidate 383792.
Yes.
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 Candidate 201735.
No.
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 Candidate 383339.
Yes.
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 Candidate 365724.
Yes.
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 Candidate 383802.
Hold.
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 Candidate 371596.
Yes.
Yes.
And candidate 387223.
No.
Hold.
Hold.
So we have 3 held candidates.
Commissioners, would you like to hold the executive discussion today through executive session or postpone an executive session?
I would like to postpone it to a future executive session.
Yeah.
All right,
We'll postpone.
we'll postpone those candidates for future executive session or in the next immediate meeting.
Okay, so that exhausts the list, right?
Yes.
Alrighty. So I'm gonna move down.
200.
What I'm gonna do right now. I'm gonna ask for a motion to dismiss appeal with prejudice, appeal case number 25 Charles Sam Charles 10 Adam. Can I get a motion?
Motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Okay, there will be no executive session today, so we're gonna move directly to Rule 12. Alright,
Thank you.
I think that's where I step off.
All right. All right. Thank you so much for being here today. We are now in the agenda item of our part 2 of our ongoing series of dialogues regarding Rule 12. So I just want to request if folks at the table would like to introduce themselves. Let's start with Mr. Shea.
Sean Lane, I'm attorney representative for the PPA.
Josh Vasconcelos, I'm Vice President of the PPA.
Brian DeFalco, President of the PPA.
Tom Wolf, City Attorney's Office.
Liz Castle, Independent Monitor.
Matt Conley, PPA.
Joe Stadler, PPA.
Eddie Mejia, PPA.
Anna Cunningham, PPA.
And we start with you.
Desmond Fulton, Chief Denver Fire.
Chris Ferguson, President, Local 858. Devin Halleck, Secretary Treasurer, 858. Tom Drogo, Civil Service Director, 858.
Nancy Calvo, Civil Service.
Chief Tom.
Ron Thomas, Police Chief.
Andy Bass, 858. Todd Rivas, 858.
And do we have folks in attending virtually that would like to introduce themselves?
Amanda Clark on behalf of Local 858.
Thank you.
David Hagman, Denver Fire.
Robin Jones with OSCI.
All right, we appreciated everybody who has come here and who's attending virtually. I will turn it over to our presenters. We have requested the chiefs of fire and police to present on their disciplinary action. And for those who are in attendance and for anyone who may be interested, you can always check and look back through the notes from our November meeting to kind of, as a point of reference on what was already previously discussed and presented. Much of the information was provided by the employee groups during the November meeting. So today's dialogue is to give the platform to the department, to department chiefs to present on what does the disciplinary procedure from your perspective and based on your procedures as well. So Chief Thomas, Chief Fulton, I don't know if you're gonna do a coin toss or,
Arm wrestle. I have handouts, so,
okay, we'll go with the one with the handout.
so, that is kind of two different diagrams of sort of our discipline process, both the internal affairs investigative process and then sort of the process as it goes from internal affairs through to conduct review for final disciplinary order. They're both very confusing. I spent 3 tours in internal affairs and I barely understand the graphs, but I can kind of walk you through kind of a bullet point fashion exactly how our discipline process goes. And so, once internal affairs receives a complaint, and obviously they can receive a complaint in a number of ways. It can be internally generated from the department. They can be received through citizens contacting internal affairs as well as contacting the Office of the Independent Monitor. Once internal affairs receives a complaint, it's assigned to an investigator. Typically, they have 60 days to complete the investigation. That could be delayed either because of the complexity of the case or if it involves some sort of a criminal charge like a DUI or something like that. Then obviously, we kind of stay the investigation until that criminal matter is resolved. Once the investigation is complete, it's sent forward to the Office of the Independent Monitor for their review, and that review is generally to determine whether or not the investigation is thorough and complete. Once the OIM reviews the case, it's then forwarded to our conduct review office. And then within the conduct review office, we have 3 individuals who have law degrees who have reviewed those cases and determine whether or not there is a finding, see how that particular finding falls within the disciplinary handbook, and then that is returned to the Conduct Review Bureau commander for their review and final recommendation. That is then forwarded back to the Office of the Independent Monitor for their review of that particular analysis. And then once they return that back to our Conduct Review office, they really kind of depends at that point. So if everyone agrees that it's either unfounded or exonerated or not sustained, or if everyone has agreed to an informal outcome, the officers then serve with the outcome of that investigation. If there's any training prescribed, that is performed by a professional development unit. If, however, the case results in fine time, suspended time, or termination, the case is then presented at a weekly Chief's Conduct Review hearing, which is held every Tuesday. And then the facts and merits of the case are presented, discussed by all individuals in attendance at that meeting, to include the Office of the Independent Monitor. And then following all of the input there, a disciplinary recommendation is then made. And typically within 1 week, the officer is served with the contemplation of discipline. Officers at that time have the option to sign off and agree to the disciplinary recommendation. If they choose not to do so, they have 24 hours to indicate that they would like to go to a chief's hearing. If they have elected to go to a chief's hearing, typically that is set about 2 to 6 weeks out. Again, that often is determined by the availability of their attorney or representative. Prior to the chief's hearing, there is an opportunity for an investigative review process where the subject officers and their representatives are allowed to review the case as many times as they deem necessary. During that process, they may identify or request that there be some additional investigation. If additional investigation is agreed upon by both the Conduct Review Bureau commander and the IA commander, then that additional investigation is made. That may warrant an additional chief's hearing. And then ultimately, when the chief's hearing occurs, again, that is attended by the individual as well as their representation. At that hearing, additional evidence or information is presented, and then at that time, the recommendation that was initially made can remain unchanged. It could be changed depending on what was presented by the officer or their representative. And then the ultimate decision made by the chief is then forwarded to the executive director of safety, who ultimately determines what the disciplinary penalty is. I think it's at that time that if they're still not agreeing with the decision that's been made, that is when they file their appeal to civil service.
Thank you.
Leave anything out, fellas?
Commissioners, would you like Chief Fulton's presentation before you ask questions, or do you want to ask questions for Chief Thomas at this time?
I don't have any questions.
I'll hold questions.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Chief Fulton, floor is yours.
So Devin Halleck has a flow chart we're going to attempt to pull up here. But to kind of give you some background, we were the last city agency that had a formal discipline process in place. So I was fortunate at the time I was a captain, and I was actually the representative of Local 858 for civil service. So we had a lot of work ahead of us, and we had the opportunity to look at a lot of other departments, look at the police department on what worked well and what didn't, when we were going through the Rule 12 changes. When I came into administration, I was a division chief of administration when we built the discipline matrix. And at that time, we had a really good working relationship with Local 858. There was a lot of collaboration. I think Jennifer Jacobson from the city attorney's office was one of the representatives from CAO, obviously Local 858. There was about 10 people in meeting rooms for about a year as we came to formulate what made sense for us. And what I mean for what made sense for us is we are even though we're safety, we're quite different than the police department because we don't have many folks that fall under Ms. Castle and her team. We have a handful of folks that are post-certified, but because of the differences there, it's a much different flow. And we approach discipline in quite a different fashion because of that. So very similar to Chief Thomas in police, we have the opportunity for charges to formally be filed. Once those are filed, then we have a group of peers that are on what we call a conduct review board. And that conduct review board is made up of a panel of firefighters. And it is a firefighter that's at the same rank of the person that's being investigated. The next person is one rank above that individual being investigated. Then the division chief of administration who oversees all discipline within the Denver Fire Department. The division chief of the person that is facing discipline. If it's someone that is in arson, for instance, it would be the admin chief. If it's in operations, it would be the operations chief. Tech services chief, so on and so forth. So we have, can you pull that up a little bit bigger? I need to get some different eyes. If you can see that the discipline flow chart in orange there. So on that, the case number is assigned, investigation is initiated, and we start fact finding. Once that's done, the member will be required to come down for questioning, and obviously they have the opportunity to bring representation from Local 858 with them. Once that is done, there's potential for no discipline and a verbal or written reprimand can take place. It could be completely unfounded. If it's unfounded, we'll let that individual know that this is not warranted, it's dismissed, and there's a summation letter. There could be potential for discipline, and that would be a reprimand and above. And if that's the case, then we have the intake meeting. At the intake meeting, we've got a rep from EDOS, we've got the administration division chief that I spoke to who oversees all of our discipline, and then the firefighters, same rank, one above And from that intake meeting, again, we have either the opportunity to confer with city attorney's office. They're on the far left of this, and we confer with EDOS on the far right. If it does go to a formal discipline, then more questions are asked. We want to ensure that we're fact finding, and when we fact find, the intent isn't to prove guilt. The intent is to not prove a specific outcome. The intent is merely to fact find. And, you know, sometimes it's just is equal to where through fact finding that we prove that these allegations are indeed false, or this didn't take place, or it was a misunderstanding. And at that time, we can clear that case. If not, we will go to a formal discipline, and a CODA or contemplation discipline is enacted. We then have a rep from EDOS, who in the past was a deputy director. We serve the member a CODA, give them specific time to confer with local 858. We have a pre-dis meeting. And within that pre-dis meeting, they have a chance to have legal representation if they choose. They have the ability or opportunity to have local 858 representation, which more often than not absolutely takes place, sometimes with multiple people. And they get a chance to really say their side of the story. Once that's done, the recommendation comes to me, but it's from that board. And I want to be very clear, that's where I think we're unique, is it's a panel made up of our peers. So the peers make a recommendation based off of our discipline matrix. We didn't bring that matrix because it's about 40 pages and it's very technical, but there's different levels of discipline. And based off of the charges and where it falls within our code of conduct book, then there is a maximum discipline, there is the minimum discipline, and then, you know, there can obviously be mitigators and aggravators. All that's taken into account. That conduct review board makes a recommendation up to me. At that time, I can either agree with it and send it up to the EDOS. I can take that discipline and I can up it, or I can take that discipline and knock it down. I can tell you this, that 99% of the time, I go with what is recommended and then move that up to the director's office. There may be an instance or two where I feel that our folks are harder on individuals being disciplined than I would have been. That seems to be more of the norm anymore. So I try to take that into account too. I think we like to hold our own accountable. We're very proud of who we are and what we do, and we don't want to tarnish the badge, if you will. Once that is done, my written recommendation goes to the executive director of safety's office, and that is where the final discipline will come from, is that office. We do have the opportunity to discuss back and forth, because it's not just a file, this is a person. And sometimes there are things that are not in that file that I want that director to know about that person. Maybe he doesn't tell them they've been on our job for 30 years and all the amazing things that they've done. I feel as humans, we all fall down, and sometimes we need to be picked up and dusted off a little bit. But in the end, I like the way things work with this process. I will say for the record that, you know, Rule 12 being around as long as it has been, I am in favor of looking at things and massaging things if needed. You know, what happened 10 years ago or 15 years ago was for specific reasons at that moment in time. And as we grow, things change, needs change. So there are opportunities, I feel, to make things better. And if there are there in the present, I think it's incumbent upon us to take that moment to say, hey, can this be better for us? Can this be better for everyone, and try to find that win-win solution? With that, I'll take a pause to see if there's any questions or thoughts. Did I get that flow right?
Can we get a copy of that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I also did bring in our discipline matrix that he was talking about, so if anybody wants to take a look at it, we do have that as well. We can bring copies of it if needed as well.
You want me to send links to everything?
Chief Thomas, did you have anything to add before we go to the commissioners?
You know, I think I liked his kind of summation statement at the end, which is, you know, we understand why changes were made to Rule 12 when they were, but I think, you know, we're at a different time. And so certainly open to changes that make sense.
Commissioners?
So I just had a question, Chief Fulton. You said that at the time that you make the recommendation to Al or whoever's in that chair, you also might add some other things that aren't written. Why aren't they written? Why isn't that?
I guess I need to clarify. Everything is very specific and written. throughout the report of what happened with that particular discipline. What I do like to discuss at times is, you know, I may know that person, I know their career, I know what they've done, and sometimes that file doesn't display how they've been a stellar member, what they've done to make our department better. Those little things that, you know, I know, but maybe he doesn't know that I think are relevant. You know, when we send over, I'll give you an example for the approval for promotions. We always send over accommodations as well as discipline history. I view this as the same. It's easy to look at what's wrong, but we're human, and what have they done to make our job better, make society better? And sometimes that case is not indicative of who they are as an individual.
I'd like to understand historically, because again, I wasn't around then, so I don't know. There was a change made to Rule 12 that I believe created an imbalance, right? Structural imbalance. And so I guess what I would ask is if there is some understanding as to where in the processes from the beginning do we believe that there's an opportunity to present a proper challenge to the process? There are, and I haven't been through them all, so I'm trying to choose my words carefully, but it feels like without a true opportunity to challenge the process, it seems more like a validation than it does a process. So can either one of you walk me through that thinking as to why we would remove that from the very beginning? And not provide that opportunity right up front. And I hope I'm wording it correctly if my ask is clear.
Sure. I don't want to step on toes, but I would like to hear from Bob, and not to put you on the spot, but you've been
I was sort of
presentation for a
thinking
long
I'd be
time
on
in
the
your
spot.
part of the process. Would you mind painting a picture of where we were and how we got to where we are? And then I
Right.
can.
So I think what the amendments to Rule 12 was a response to was a belief that the disciplinary process had essentially been taken out of the hands of management and overly placed in the hands of hearing officers. And so that you no longer had what would be a typical employer-employee relationship, but rather something that more looked like a court adversarial process where it was management, for whatever reasons, having to validate, let's say, its decisions, right? And that's not how typical workplaces are. And I think the belief was that this was especially inappropriate with uniformed services, basically paramilitary organizations, where command structure was important and necessary and part of the ethos of the job, basically. So you had hearing officers telling the manager of safety or telling the chief that, no, I disagree, simply because they disagreed. And that did not seem to be a good way to run a fire department or a police department. And so there was thinking that we needed these amendments to bring the disciplinary process back to what we thought would be a better functioning management structure. In the process, did it sacrifice some rights that the employees had previously? Absolutely. But the belief was that it was out of balance to begin with. And when I say balance, I don't mean 50-50, because the whole idea was that in the employer-employee relationship, and especially a paramilitary employer-employee relationship, it shouldn't be a 50-50 balance, right? I mean, there should be much more weight given to management. And I think it was that belief that the system had gotten out of hand and that management was losing control as a result, prompted these changes.
I'm sorry, but you said you wanted to give more balance back to management to make the decisions and take and sacrifice some of the rights of the rank and file.
Right, because it was, I would, you know, on one hand, you could say it was even, everyone was 50-50. But on the other hand, given the fact that you went into disciplinary hearings with the burden of proof being on management, the the tilting was actually in favor of employees in disciplinary hearings. And so when I say restore the balance, I mean restore a balance, not necessarily a 50-50 balance.
Do you feel like we restored balance, or do you feel like we just flipped the script and went the opposite direction and gave more onus on the employee to prove or to work towards an exoneration than management's?
I just don't think balance is the right.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good sign.
Inappropriate.
Yeah.
That's why.
Because if it's
Balance
80-20, it's
is
not balance, right? It's like, yeah,
I
like.
mean, This is the balance that I'm thinking of as opposed to this. Has it gone too far? I think that's your question.
Yes.
And I think that is a policy decision that everyone here has to decide on. I mean, is it difficult? Is it very difficult for an employee to escape discipline under this process? Undoubtedly. There's just no, that just can't be disputed. But on the other hand, from a policy standpoint, that could be the way you want it, right? And I think that was part of the decision that was made, is that, yeah, it should be really hard to overturn discipline. Management should get all the benefit of the doubt because they are management. That is why those people are there making those decisions, right? And so there should be a presumption of correctness. You can take some of that away.
So as a point of clarity, we're not talking about providing balance to overturn a disciplinary action. We're talking about balance and determination of whether or not discipline should be.
Okay, all right, and in that case, I misunderstood. I don't think there's any imbalance in that initial determination at all. Nothing about Rule 12 changed that internal process. Rule 12 did not affect how the individual agencies arrive at a disciplinary decision, except the fact that maybe they were advised then by the disciplinary matrices that were adopted, which didn't exist before Rule 12. So, but there was nothing in the rules that requires, for instance, the process that Chief Fulton just outlined. In fact, I was frankly surprised to hear that line officers had a say or an opinion in the disciplinary process. I would not have expected that at all. Certainly that's not necessary by any rule or any law or regulation or concept of due process or anything like that. But specifically to answer your question, Rule 12 did not affect, it was not affected internally regarding how either the police or the fire department arrived at the decision to discipline.
So my question is, and trying to, get all this stuff in my head because I wasn't here. My only real question is, was any aspect of due process for the employees sacrificed, as you said, with the changes in Rule 12, do you think?
So I'm going to say what lawyers always say about due process, and that it is a flexible concept, and due process generally is simply notice and an opportunity to be heard. Okay. The issue of due process has been litigated, and this particular Rule 12 itself has been litigated. There have been due process challenges to Rule 12, and the courts have found that our current Rule 12 satisfies both the U.S. Constitution as far as due process.
Second question, I'm sorry, what's your name again?
Sean Lane.
Sean, good to see you again. I remember seeing you at the community meeting we had. The one thing that stuck out in my head from that meeting was, I think I have this correct, where there was an assertion that facts that a police officer wanted to bring to the chief's hearing for further investigation by internal affairs sometimes did not happen, which to me just seems kind of amazing. So I want to make sure, did I hear that right?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Does that sound right to you?
It doesn't. As I described in the process, I mean, there is an opportunity to ask for additional investigation or to ask for additional facts to be considered, and then it's kind of the determination of both the Commander of Internal Affairs and the Commander of Conduct Review to determine whether or not that additional investigation will take place or those additional facts will be considered.
Yeah, that's the only thing that I'm kind of stuck on that, because I don't understand necessarily under what circumstances that would.
And if I could speak,
You want to
to-
respond, right?
in fact, I think he would like to speak this.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak. So when we ask for that phase 2 investigation as a representative, or if council asks for that phase 2 investigation as after the contemplation of discipline has been issued, the Commander of Conduct Review or the Commander of Internal Affairs can deny that investigation and say, no, we're not going to ask those questions. We're not going to try and bring up those facts. That has happened.
I've had 2 cases where phase 2 investigations have been denied. And the first time it happened, I was on the record in a pre-disciplinary meeting, which also on here is the chief's hearing. And I said, I'm shocked that you're not going to do this. And the response was, well, we don't see a reason for it. Part of the problem is, and one of the things, and I don't want to go on too long because I know this is a specific question, but this process that the chief has provided, that's correct. This is the process that's followed. But what we're talking about with respect to Rule 12 kind of happens off the paper. You know, what we get down to is, you know, in the lower right-hand corner is the chief's hearing in the CRB office. Rule 12 also talks about that hearing as being the pre-disciplinary meeting. And I think that that's a better indication of what actually happens there. It's not truly a hearing. The officer is entitled to give some mitigation if they want to, but there aren't any witnesses. The officer can't present a case. So nowhere on this complaint process does the officer have an opportunity to challenge this process. The opportunity to challenge happens after the final decision from the Executive Director of Public Safety. So throughout this process, there's no putting brakes on. This is going to happen. Then our opportunity to challenge at the first instance, we are required to have a showing of clear error, which I think is fundamentally unfair. And I think I've made that clear.
Yeah. I would just, you know, I think, you know, obviously police officers think differently than firefighters, but maybe we think the same on this issue. I think that, you know, in you know, a criminal hearing, the burden of proof is on the state or the, you know, or the city and not the defendant. And I think in this instance, I think what the union would say is that it feels like the burden of proof is on us, the accused, and that's not right. And I think that that is kind of the fundamental change in the change to Rule 12 back when it happened.
To preponderance of evidence.
So I got a couple things. First, our attorney wants to say something, but I want to say that when we're, as a representative of 858, and Chief brought this up, we get to sit in the room, but as a representative, I don't get to speak about anything. I have to take a break and then take that person out of the room. I think that for further process, if we want to represent our members, the civilian side that really doesn't know how the fire department works, I think we should be able to have some comments in that meeting, especially during a CODA. And Chief was right, our CRB board, they're pretty hard on their own members. I mean, I know because I earned a law degree over the kitchen the last 15 years. So, I'd like to see some of that stuff change too. It's like, Chief has been good with that, letting us represent that, but we're not able to speak. And I think us as public servants, we understand that side, but if you're not on this side, you don't understand this. There's times where I'd like to explain stuff when I can't. I have to kind of take a pause, shut everything down, go into a separate room. So
You would like to be able to explain stuff to the panel?
the panel, yes.
Like, and they're firefighters, so they.
No, some of them are not firefighters. Like some of them are from the manager of safety's office, you know?
Okay.
Executive director's office, I mean, so.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
And is,
Amanda's on right now, so.
yeah.
We have somebody, Amanda?
Yes, hi. I just wanted to kind of back up part of what Chris was talking about just now, which is that also it's, I would say, unusual, and our firm practices across several states and mostly in public safety. It is unusual to see firefighters, officers being pulled into IA investigations, and not have some sort of idea of what they're walking into, and then have their union representative again not be able to speak. So usually there's some notice of charges that come. So that's one point, but I think the harder part for us to address, and this is backing up what the police representative said also, is when it comes to the appeal, the burden being on the employee to prove the charges that the employer has brought against them is backwards to pretty much any other disciplinary process that I deal with, that my partners deal with. And again, I'm talking about public safety. And it's not only that the burden is on the employee, but Rule 12 sets a evidentiary standard for the employee to meet that is almost impossible. They start at the bottom of a hill with a boulder on their back. That is, the hurdle to clear there is almost impossible for an employee with legal representative, without legal representative, because the assumption is that the employee is guilty and they have to somehow disprove that guilt, but the presumption is already there. I think the other thing as well is that if the employee chooses to appeal, the option is that the discipline can get worse and possibly reopen the investigation. So there are a lot of, while it's been ruled to meet the very basic definition of due process, there are a lot of things baked into the system that weigh heavily against the employee. And it isn't a matter of doubting management's decision for discipline. It's a matter of the burden should be on management to prove that they had the evidence to support the charges that they're giving against the employee. That's really the standard I deal with everywhere else. It was shocking for us to learn that it was the opposite here in Denver. It makes it almost impossible. I think the term was used before, the deck was stacked against the employee. The deck is very stacked against the employee here. So I would say that nationwide, that is not the standard operating procedure for disciplinary decisions to be upheld.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
So if you had to make a tweak, like I speaking for myself, I don't want to get into a whole scale revision of Rule 12 and revisiting all this stuff. And I do believe that managers should manage. That includes the entire process. But if you had to make a tweak in the process to achieve the balance that you think should be made in terms of burden of proof and that kind of thing, what would you do? And at what stage in the process?
So at the very least, I think that an employee needs a fair shot at being able to address the discipline. And I think that at the very least, that can be in the appeal process where there's the hearing, that the burden is not on the employee to disprove the allegations with the presumption against them. I think that when that amendment was made to Rule 12, it more than created an imbalance. It made it almost impossible for an employee to get a fair hearing about the discipline issued to them. So I think there's a two-part problem in that appeal process. And again, I think there's a larger scope to look at here, but at least giving the chance to address the discipline, it's where the burden sits and then the level of burden put on the employee.
I know we have some statistics that bolster this argument. But do we have then in-house statistics? Can we compare and contrast, or is it just the statistics that have been provided?
We have statistics then and now. I don't know that we have that, although we certainly would be happy to provide those. It might take a little bit of time, but we can get those together.
Yeah, no, I would love to see it, because I mean, I'm curious. I think this is, what, 13 years old now?
Yes, well, 14, 13.
Yeah. And I'd be really curious to see, I mean, as much information on this as possible, just, even the number obviously, but even if we have demographics, if we have, rank, anything like that. I don't know that, I don't expect that you to have that, but I would love to see that, because I'm thinking about, and the question I have, well, have you seen the memo with some of the, I think those Commissioner Foster, your memo.
Oh, yes.
I think it's been sent around to everybody.
And there's some, I won't call them proposed changes, some thoughts on this that
Right.
potentially contemplate some changes. A question I have, because like if you mentioned, I think, four individuals with law degrees, they kind of do some of this review and things like that.
Yes.
My question is, have you contemplated with this change, resource allocation, would there need to be additional resources put towards this process? If we change the standard of review, if anything like that? I mean, you can't sniff anything at the state level without getting a fiscal note that has pretty significant consequences. I'd be curious, especially thinking about our budget situation and things like that. If we were to enact some of these changes, let's say, like, would this be a pretty significant, would this be a change in resources we need to allocate towards this process?
For us, I'll answer. We're a skeleton crew, if you will, as it is. We have basically one chief that oversees admin, and he is one of these officers, and we have a captain. That's it. We have basically two bodies, one fully dedicated to this and one that has about 10 other responsibilities. So this, I mean, obviously, like anything, we're all doing more with less. You know, it has potential, but it doesn't mean it's the wrong idea. You know, if we can make things better and have more ability to get things right, I think we owe that to everybody. So I mean, that would be something that we would have to look at, and it could impact us when it comes to.
I think one of the outcomes was this is more administratively functioning better administratively, I think is what it's doing. It's more streamlined because of the way it's structured currently. So
My view,
I think that achievement was, those results were achieved.
agreed. This would definitely
You mean the
add
original
time
charge?
to the
Yeah,
process.
The original changes made it more administratively effective from a cost perspective. And that, I mean, that was discussed at the last meeting, and I agree with you. I don't think it matters. We shouldn't be talking about cost here. It's people's lives.
I mean, I would respectfully say that I would love to see an analysis, like just an estimate. I understand it's not the only factor, but there are no changes we make, no policies we enact at the state level regardless. Doesn't mean we make our decisions entirely based upon it, but I think it's entirely reasonable to ask for, if we're gonna change something that could dramatically change the discipline system, to ask for just a general estimate.
I have a couple of questions here. The first one is, when was the last time that the disciplinary matrix and review processes were reviewed?
So we go over ours every 2 years. It doesn't mean we look at it through a lens of trying to blow things up. This one was 2023 when this was approved, so it has to be reviewed, and 26 is the next review date.
Because Rule 12 was changed in 2015, right?
Oh.
So just trying to kind
I thought it
of,
was 13. 13 in my brain.
Correct.
so just to kind of like for the public who's also listening, to put things in perspective, and commissioners, if I may make a comment, if you allow me to. I think, you know, in the Rule 12 dialogue, I think it's healthy to really look at it as an ecosystem of support, right? It starts from the training that the officers and the firefighters are getting to ensure that they are aware of the procedures and the policies. It goes into the disciplinary procedures, how robust are they? And sometimes best laid out plans have opportunities as well. So within, you know, I'm also curious to see, because we're talking about changing the appeals process, but the appeals process is an avenue for people to appeal if something in this disciplinary procedure may or may not be working or as effectively as intended. So I kind of just want to ground us in that conversation, and that's kind of part of the purpose today, is to really understand if we are sort of discussing potential changes to the appeals process, let's step back, and are there opportunities within the disciplinary procedures that we may have to look at? Because if we change Rule 12 and we're back to why we changed it to begin with, we're not really problem solving. So really hoping we could dialogue in identifying what are the root causes of maybe some imbalances that we're identifying. And like, those are just some questions that hopefully can challenge us to think more globally about the topic. Because locking in interchanging Rule 12, if we're not addressing the beginning of it, then we might also set ourselves up for missed opportunities, if you will. And that's not to say, the matrix, I think we have a robust matrix for police. And for firefighter, it looks like, you've got a good process, but what does it feel and look like in reality, right? Like, if we're talking about the firefighter side of the house, you've got your CRB as their peers. Are they receiving the training that they need, to be able to sit there and look at it, not just from a peer's perspective, but from a disciplinary perspective? And then are the members really and truly, on the police side of things, are they really and truly getting the due process in all of those pieces? And I think one of the questions that were answered, like, if they are represented by the employee groups, are they or are they truly not? I think the public, that's something that they might want to hear, because I think we heard that today. I think there was a comment where the union reps are not allowed to speak. Well, are they? Should they? Or can't they? So those are just some things. I know I threw in a lot of there, food for thought. Today's not the end of the dialogue, but it helps us. Commissioners, did I ask right?
I think you're right on target. Is like, we need to try to identify together a particular problem that's contributing to this outcome that could be tweaked and create a fairer outcome that everybody could agree to. Normally, in these kind of situations, workplaces, those things are determined in contract negotiations where you agree on what the discipline matrix is. So that there's no misunderstandings or no built-in unfairnesses or what have you. But I do think, given that that's not how this appears to work, that if together we can figure out where the pinch points are here that create the imbalances that create some discomfort and maybe get more like this instead of like that, that's what we really need to be focused on. That's what I want to focus on. And I think the approach that Gracie just laid out, I think is helpful and deserves consideration. So, but again, as far as I'm concerned, I'm still in the fact-finding mode. I'm still trying to learn. I got to read this damn thing. I want to read that 40-page thing, that matrix, whatever it is. I want to read it. There's just a lot to consider here. But I will say one last thing. As a journalist for 40 years, when I was a young journalist, I was amazed because I used to write stories all the time about police chiefs imposing discipline and the Civil Service Commission almost routinely reversing that. And I was like, what is that Civil Service Commission? This is in Dayton, Ohio. Like, how is it that the chief of the police department can't impose discipline on the people that work for him or her? And I never really understood it. I assume it probably was a Rule 13 in Dayton or whatever that allowed that kind of thing to happen. But I know what the impact was on the community, and it was a lot of distrust and a lot of dissatisfaction. And I don't think anybody wants to go back to that. So I think if we can put our heads together and figure out a way to address the main concerns of the rank and file, I mean, I think we can probably get some heads together and figure that out. At least I hope so.
Commissioner Moore, and I would love to get our discipline in the contract if you want to sign up.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
I'm just saying.
Chief Fulton's on board with me.
Yeah, we would love that too.
I don't think you can change the charter.
I'm gonna leave that alone.
Right. I think I would say, in my final thoughts here, I just very much appreciate everybody coming to the table and having a conversation, first and foremost. Chief Fulton and Chief Thomas have a really freaking hard job. And they're trying to balance the needs of the city, the needs of the community, and the needs of the individuals in the rank and file. And I respect them for that. I haven't worn this uniform in a long time, so I don't know what I can't even remember what it was like to be a police officer. And so it's hard. It's a different kind of a job than, I have hundreds and hundreds of employees, and it's a very different kind of a job than anybody that I work with. And so I just appreciate not only the dialogue and the effort that everyone's giving, but I will say I appreciate, and you guys don't get to see it, the real mature well thought out conversations in the way we challenge each other behind the scene as commissioners. And I can tell you that we don't always agree. And what we find, the answers are in our group somewhere, and we're gonna work to find them. And I believe that the answers are in this room. And if to Greg's point, if we all work to find them, I think we can update, modify, enhance, in a way that will make everybody more comfortable and give us all the ability to have more trust in the process.
Yeah, a couple, and I have a thing of questions that I will share offline to spare you the time, but a question that I'm putting out there, and Mr. Lane, I appreciate the memo you put together based on my questions last time. I am curious, and Bob, maybe I get this from you and one of us out there as well. I'm curious a little bit the history of the advocacy since, this, and I've been on the commission for 5 years, I think. And when I first started, there was people that were advocating to me to go under the hood and change, and people advocating to me before I even knew what it was, before I even turn the lights on here. And not that I have learned how to turn lights on, and people that were advocates for preserving it were in my ear from that time. And so I know there's been advocacy for at least 5 years, and it sounds like there was some judicial review of this as well. And I'd be very curious to see that as well. And agree with everything other commissioners said as well. I appreciate Ms. Castle being here as well. Something I would note is I believe the wisdom is in this room. I also, if there are other people that should be in this room, literally or figuratively, and having these conversations, because I also, from my understanding of more than a decade ago, is that was a messy process. A lot of people were brought involved. Maybe folks that maybe, a lot of, I'm not saying we should duplicate that or certainly that, but I would say that I'm sure there are other stakeholders who will be impacted by any proposed changes or keeping it the same, who are probably not here right now. And so and I put that out to everyone, if there are people that are not here that should be, I know that we are open to hearing from those perspectives as well. I agree as well. I'm gonna fact finding. This is a big task to take on. I think there was a very valid attempt, more than a decade ago that wasn't perfect. I don't think anyone's gonna say it's perfect. And for us to pretend that we can just snap our fingers and fix it immediately, I think is not giving credit to folks who spent a lot of time in that fact finding and thinking through it. So I just really appreciate everyone's engagement. I said this in the last community engagement session. I wish all of our meetings were as lively and as engaged and things like that, but I guess they're not normally as interesting as this. But so I just want to say thank you.
Yeah. Is there any other comments that we need?
Yeah, does anybody from the virtual attendants would like to say anything? All right, one of the data asks that.
I would love it. Do you have any comments you'd like to make?
No, not at this time, thank you.
No, one of the data asks also that as we go through some of the electronic conversation is if the employee groups could also maybe provide some case studies of like maybe, appeals recently, maybe in last 2-3 years, that if Rule 12, let's say the way you propose it would have a different outcome. I think that is also of interest to the departments and to the commissioner. So, example cases like if Rule 12 was not the way this was, or if Rule 12 was the way we want it to be, this appeal would have gone differently, or, just as part of a discussion, part of fact finding.
Does anybody in the room have any other comments or questions or thoughts?
Todd Rivers from 858. One of the things that I'm concerned about is the impartiality within the discipline process of the Denver Fire Department. If you have, and I think this is kind of brought up, we have firefighters that are reviewing this situation. These are firefighters that aren't trained in any kind of HR. They don't have any kind of HR training. They don't have any legal training. So those opinions are going into the decision-making process at some level. The Denver Fire Department is 1,200 people. That's a large organization, but it's not without bias within that organization. So when we're talking about a demotion or a termination, I wonder can we separate that bias out enough that that member gets, everything is fair for them? Or is the organization not big enough to, you can pull that out and it could be completely fair? I don't know that we have that ability. I wonder if the evaluation from the department, the limited number of people that are involved in that process, and then the firefighters that are involved in that process, is the member gonna get a fair shake out of that? And I don't know that they are, because I don't know that the organization is big enough to do it. And so when it comes down to that review and that ultimate decision, I think that was part of what the Civil Service Commission used to be part of. And I was around when that happened too, when civil service would reverse a lot of discipline. I don't think we want to go back to that. But if you're talking about termination or demotion, maybe a larger group of people that don't know anything about this part of the fire department, don't have a history with that firefighter or that firefighter's family, maybe those commissioners or those people should be the ones that are making the final determination.
Do you know of a system that works that way? Anywhere?
I don't, I think,
Curious.
I think Amanda can probably give you a better evaluation of that, because they represent so many other departments in public safety and how those processes work. I think she probably has better information. I've only known this process.
Yeah. It's interesting, because I would think that people that actually understand how the job is done and what's expected and what the norms are will be in the best position to make a determination whether somebody violated that, as opposed to a layman who doesn't know anything about.
And I see your point. My concern is, can you get away from that bias in an organization that's not big enough where you don't know? More than likely, I will know that firefighter or that firefighter's family. If I'm reviewing their discipline and I have a history, or somebody I know has a history with them, can I remove myself from that effectively enough to not have a bias?
Yeah, I don't think you're always gonna get it 100% right, and I don't think you're ever gonna get bias out of it. So there's gonna be bias, and that's fortunate and unfortunate in some aspects. And so I think it's about intent counts a lot here, and technique is what we're talking about, right? And so if we could get the intent on the table, I think the technique will mature or be enhanced in a way that we can all live with it.
Interesting points. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
What's it? This is mostly affecting you two. Is there any last comments or anything else? Sorry, I'm making you all miserable right now, but.
No, I think this is healthy. This is good. We're trying to find ways to be better. Obviously, this is a much deeper conversation. Obviously, as you spoke to, Gracie, we need to have the director of safety here. For sure. There's a lot of people I think need to participate. We spent hundreds and hundreds of hours trying to get it right. You know, it's not perfect, but I think the intent of everyone here is to make things better.
Yeah.
Like hour two of it's gonna solve it.
Probably not.
You know, and I would just ask, we're asking for some data and we're asking for some information, and you guys can inundate us with all kinds of stuff that would obscure what we're trying to get to. So I would ask you to just be a little bit judicious in what you do give us and try to keep it as current and relevant as you can, because I know that everybody independently is really doing a lot of hard work to try and understand this. And once we all collectively get up to speed, then we will have a better opportunity to have a wholesome dialogue as a group, which we haven't had yet. And so that's really important for you guys to give us current and relevant data that doesn't steer toward an agenda. That would be helpful for us. Sure.
Chief Thomas?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Civil Service Commission's commitment is obviously to document these conversations so that we have continuity in our discussions. Again, this is going to be a series of dialogue, and for clarity, fact finding is emphasized. So right now, the commission is taking no position whatsoever at this time. We are trying to get all the information that we can get so that the commissioners can have it at their disposal as they have more thoughtful conversations in the future. So if you have any information to share, don't worry, I have the opportunity to compile them. So send it my way, and I will ensure that the commissioners have them in a timely fashion. So we appreciate everybody.
Absolutely. I think that's it. Are we done? Are we gonna adjourn? Alrighty, then.
Motion to adjourn.
What's that?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank you all for your comments.